Hello everyone, thank you for joining me today. I'm delighted to be joined by Rosie Bailey, the CEO of Nibble. Rosie, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Indeed it is, Rosie. I really appreciate you making the time. So, Rosie, could you start by perhaps giving people a little bit of a sense of your own personal background before we talk about the business?
Sure. So I started my career in finance. So I was a banker for 20 years. So when we get into the detail of talking about AI and agentic AI, I've learned the journey real time. Do you know what I mean? Like we started the business only 5 years ago, and prior to that, I was a finance expert. So I did that for 20 years, and then I went to university very late in life, did a bit like an executive MBA at London Business School, used that as an opportunity to think about doing something completely different, met my co-founder, and we founded Nibble 5 years ago out of university.
Wonderful. And this video is part of our broader education series aimed at trying to help procurement professionals understand more about what AI can do for the profession. And as I understand it, Nibble is an AI first, or rather, native AI solution. So can we perhaps just explain to our audience exactly what Nibble is capable of, please?
Sure. So Nibble is a negotiation agent. So in finance, I negotiated deals. I negotiated financing or buying and selling companies. I was an M&A banker. So now we're negotiating procurement deals, which are just as complex and just as long term. So you can think of Nibble as a chatbot that has a natural language conversation to reach a conclusion on a simple negotiation, perhaps agreeing payment terms or a new price or rebates, something that you can do at scale. So Nibble could negotiate while you sleep thousands and thousands of times.
Indeed. And on that, you've written and spoken about how AI can negotiate at speed and scale, particularly in e-commerce. What will that now take for it to work in the world of procurement, do you think?
So we've done negotiations in e-commerce for the majority of the time that Nibble's been alive, as it were, for the 4 out of the 5 years. And what that gives us is a scale that is unprecedented in the procurement space. So we've done nearly 2 million negotiations. And the reason that's important is the way people behave when they negotiate is very human and very emotive and very different how they behave when they're practicing or pretending.
Right.
And so that information that we have from how they've behaved that nearly 2 million times allows us to create a chatbot that is uniquely tuned in, if you like. It's empathetic at the end of the day. And so from that point of view, we do that. We also work with a professor of negotiation from London Business School. So it's behavioral psychology at its crux.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I actually spoke to a procurement leader at DPW Amsterdam last year. So obviously you and I were speaking last week at DPW Amsterdam, but I met with an American CPO last year, and I talked about the skills required to use, automated or AI-driven negotiations, about the psychology of it all. And he said, look, understanding the psychology of it is still vital to success. However, you engage technology to use the to do the negotiation. So that's obviously a very vital part of the sort of engine that underpins your organisation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And actually something that I think is being under discussed. So we see a lot of discussion about efficiency, and that's twofold. That's both doing better deals, either better deals because you couldn't negotiate this deal before because it's too small and you didn't even try, or better deals because it's better than your average human negotiator.
Right.
And then we're talking a lot about saving people time, so effectively putting a process in place which is quicker, both for the procurement professional, but also for the supplier. And that's great. But to me, that's very much first base. Second base is actually improving the relationship. And if somebody doesn't trust the agent or the chatbot, then you're nowhere, right? So the first base is trust, and the second base is understanding and empathy. And you're at a situation now, because you can have these conversations at scale, you can actually have that one-to-one personalized conversation with people that you just couldn't have a conversation with before because you have too many suppliers.
Yeah, indeed. And that trust element is something which I think we'll come back to, because that's clearly something which was highlighted last week in particular about this new era where people have got to learn to trust what agents in particular can do if they're going to deploy them at scale. Just sticking with the e-commerce element of it, though, but what have you seen in terms of the differences between the complexity of B2B supplier deals and the comparison between procurement and e-commerce, but also what procurement can learn from consumer style negotiations? Is there any insights you can share there?
So I think a couple of things. One is the consumer is ready to have that conversation, right? They don't need any education, they don't need any training. It's very intuitive. Secondly is they want to share. It's really interesting. People share personal details about why they want to get the deal they want to get. And so people they know it's a chatbot, but they're still very willing to deeply engage. And I think you'll find that's true. And actually what we try and do is transfer some of that perhaps quite lighthearted, personal, fun capabilities that we've learned in e-commerce and not be afraid to use them a little bit judiciously in B2B conversations, right? So in e-commerce, we do B2B, not just direct to consumer brands, but we do B2B e-commerce thing like Amazon Business or something like that. And actually a little bit of lightheartedness doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? You shouldn't be afraid. It doesn't have to feel robotic. And I think that's the one key thing. It has to be professional. It can make you smile.
Yes, it can be fun. And so you mentioned that you've run sort of 2 million AI-led negotiations, and you just touched on the way humans react to intelligent agents. What has it surprised you about the questions people ask you when they're exploring using Nibble? What sort of questions do they ask? What questions don't they ask? What can you share on that?
So honestly, they forget to ask the really important questions sometimes. I have to be honest, I think I've only been asked 5 times in 5 years why Nibble gives certain deals to different people.
Right.
And obviously that's critical, right? Like if Nibble was discriminatory in its behavior and it gave great deals to rich people and bad deals to poor people, or big suppliers got terrible deals, small suppliers got great deals, this would be a real problem, right? And so asking how the AI thinks, decides, is it auditable? Often we're not asked that, and I'm very surprised. Often we're asked, can it be on brand, or what does it integrate with? But the how does it make the decisions it make, and why does it make those decisions? Often people forget, right? And I think this is natural. It's unfortunate, but natural, because this age of technology is so accessible. Like we've all used Gemini or ChatGPT, and it's so persuasive and so intuitive. You sometimes forget to question it. I mean, we've all had situations where we've asked ChatGPT something and it's invented the answer, and we've nearly been caught out by it, right? Because it looks so convincing. I think we need to be careful to ask all of the normal questions. How does it work? Is it auditable? Can you show me why it made that decision? In all of our conversations, you get the full transcript of the conversation, so you can see why you got to where you got to. But moreover, you can actually ask the agent to explain its decisions, right? Like there's a sort of thinking mode, if you like, and you can see the audit trail of, I chose to make a counter offer here because, I chose to give a reason because, or I used objection handling reason number 3 because I heard them talk about their fear about cash payment terms.
Yeah. And have you created the sort of right framework for that to be effective within the AI and the sort of operating model?
So, I mean, really, that's the experience. That's the 2 million negotiations, and some of it is sort of machine learning, reinforcement learning. Some of it is AI. Some of it isn't. Some of it's just experience. Some of it's just diligencing conversations that went well or conversations that went badly. If you imagine, we sometimes have a conversation that didn't go well. We print it out. We take it to the professor that we work with at London Business School, and a bit like Nibble was one of his students, we say, look, here's a conversation example that didn't go so well. What could we have done better? Like you would to a negotiation teacher if you were just learning to be a better negotiator.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I've started to do recently myself with the AI tools that I use is what you're referring to, which I think Jeremy Utley, the guy who teaches at Stanford, he teaches AI at Stanford, he's my sort of guru that I watch a lot. He talks a lot about chain of thought reasoning. So if you ask GPT or whatever LLM you choose to prefer on that particular day, for it to do a task, before you get it to give its output, say, okay, what's your thought process? How are you going to approach this task? So exactly the same reasoning. And actually, apparently it's been proven already that you get better outcomes from the LLM just by asking it to explain the thought process. It's also really educational for the human being to say, okay, so how is this AI going to approach this task? And, I've not thought about that. Yes, I'd do it that way myself. So that chain of thought. So really, that's something which procurement professionals should be using to interrogate your model in terms of when you're using it. Okay, let's look at why it's made that decision. And of course, I'm sure there's great learning from that for the procurement professionals. And that's plays into what the skills we're talking about. We talk about intellectual curiosity and creativity. That ability to sort of collaborate with the models and really iterate and get the very best outcomes is a big part, I think, of successfully using AI.
But I also find that people, I think, are nervous about asking the question because they're nervous their lack of experience or knowledge may be exposed. But the truth is most of us are still learning. I am definitely still learning. And if someone can't explain something to you in normal language, like I have young kids, they know what I do. I try really hard to explain it to my 9-year-olds and my 13-year-old. And if I can't explain it to them, honestly, I go back and learn a bit more so I can, and sometimes you catch yourself out halfway through. Like I sometimes people ask me about Nibble and I'm like, oh, it works like this. And then you realize you actually can't explain it very well. So you're like, I'm very sorry. I'm going to go back and get a crisper answer for you because none of it's magic. It's all probabilities and experience and databases at the end of the day.
We saw a little bit of that last week at DPW. Actually, there were some really great presentations. But when you've got a very technically minded individual trying to explain in practical terms how you deploy agents, for example, it can get a little bit complex and it's difficult to put into words, I think. And refining that description, I think, is an important part of the education, which is, of course, is what we're trying to do here to help people understand, particularly the non-technically minded procurement professionals who are not quite sure where and how you are going to be able to deploy it. And certainly there was almost too many examples last week that I think for some people will be almost sort of bewildering as to know where to get.
I think it is better sometimes to go step by step. I mean, one of the things that I'm learning that continues to slightly surprise me is how unreliable they are sometimes. And we're building all the time. And sometimes you're like, well, can't you just prompt it? And you realize that kind of can't. And this surprises me slightly. And I'm reading all the stuff that everyone else is reading on social media and LinkedIn. And it seems so powerful, but it can be very powerful once. But when you're trying to put an automation in that's actually going to help you take a human out of the loop, you need the level of reliability that is equivalent or probably in excess of a human. The way I think about it is sort of self-driving cars. So two things. One is, I think, I expected them to be here to a greater degree than they are by now. They're getting there, but I think I expected them to be more prevalent. But secondly, we hold them to a higher standard, don't we? If a self-driving car very, very sadly killed a child on a level crossing, we would be outraged.
Yeah.
Whereas if an older driver had an epileptic fit and killed a child on a crossing, we call it a tragedy, but we wouldn't be outraged. It's different, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and I think it reflects where we're at with this whole journey. But to your point about the flaws in it, they're very, very positive about the alternatives. The Gen AI tools are always very supportive and positive about your ideas, and then you ask it to sort of, okay, give me 5 reasons why this won't work, and that's actually, you've got to sit down and be ready for
you got to push it.
Yeah, but there's a few things I've worked on recently where I've asked it to sort of criticise what I've done, and it's very good at that as well once you ask it to.
Get prepared.
It really is that sit down and be ready for a bit of criticism. But it's like collaborating with an extremely intelligent, coachable, and a human being that you can give feedback to. You can ask them for its chain of thought reasoning. You can give it clear direction and ask it to report back on its findings. And I find that really exciting personally. Anyway, getting back to buying procurement tools in particular. So you mentioned that people don't always ask how Nibble actually sort of awards the deals and why it makes the decisions it makes. That's obviously a key thing that procurement people should be asking. What else do people get wrong when buying negotiation tools, particularly in procurement more so than perhaps the e-commerce side?
I think it can be difficult to get beyond the buzzwords to what it really does. So I spoke to one person at DPW last week, and we were comparing notes on negotiation tools. And I have to be honest, I didn't realize there would be so many. But what I then realized is some people call preparing for a negotiation tool. Some people call RFP management, a process management workflow tool, a negotiation tool. And some people call an agent or a chatbot a negotiation tool, which is where we are. And I hadn't realized the others would exist. And she was saying that they knew they needed a negotiation tool, but they ended up taking a dozen pitches before they found the one that did what they were expecting it would do. Like there's a lot of time wasting because people are, clever salespeople are trying to bamboozle you into taking a meeting because that's what their incentive is. So I think that's the first thing is the sort of no BS questions. What does it do? The second thing is how does it do it? And to pursue that to what I would call a second level question. Right. A sort of not, it uses LLMs, but okay, tell me a little bit more, explain to me step by step, give me an auditable trail. Because what we're finding is that reliability comes with those second order questions. So Nibble, for example, a lot of what Nibble says back to the user, like literally the text that the user sees in response to the text they've typed, a lot of that is semi-fixed. Because we've found that having it purely generative is too unreliable, as in we care deeply about the tone of voice, we care deeply about being succinct, and sometimes LLMs are too verbose, and it's things like that so we've got to a situation now when the responses that come out of Nibble are taken from a discrete set of 50 what we would call tools. And so there's a tool to make a counter offer. There's a tool to give a reason. There's a tool to handle objections. There's a tool to elevate to a human. And actually what we're doing is we're picking from a list of responses using an LLM, but we're not giving the LLM full agency about picking any response, if that makes sense. And it's things like that you can learn if you start asking people, well, how have you built it and which LLM are you using, and things like different LLMs perform differently. Like every time OpenAI updates its API, everything works slightly differently, and we spend a day re-optimizing it.
Absolutely. And so this is the benefit of having 2 million negotiation under your belt and a professional London business school. And I think it's fascinating because, if you look at the Gen AI tools, again, going back to Stanford guy, Jeremy, he talks a lot about iteration. Human beings typically are programmed to want to be accepting a pretty good outcome pretty quickly. And so, most Gen AI tools will give you that. But of course, you get the real goals in the constant iteration and probing and delving and challenging.
But also, if someone's going to negotiate with a chatbot, their first thought, unfortunately for me, is going to be effing stupid chatbot. I wonder if I can get the best deal. So they're going to push it, right? They're going to push it really hard. This is not like having a really polite little negotiation with 2 nervous juniors on your team. Do you know what I mean? This is like somebody is going to be, they're going to be abusive if that's how they think they're going to get the best deal. And we've seen it all, and we don't mind. And actually, Nibble, you can't hurt Nibble's feelings. So so it really doesn't matter. But you test it in the kind of test environment with a nice, polite negotiation, and it looks great. And then you get some troublemaker trying to, print something on social media which embarrasses your brand. Then you've got reliability.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm not talking about some of the arguments I've had with ChatGPT about some of its outputs, but
yeah, exactly.
It's quite interesting to see how it responds when you sort of you're critical of it. Anyway, there we go. So, just thinking about you're talking there about the interactions between the human being and the system. We've now got tools that are talking back to us. Is procurement ready for machines that can talk back? Is the profession ready? And particularly, there might be some comparison here with the e-commerce business. How do you see that landscape?
There was a interactive chart at DPW, a wall where you could add dots
I saw it. I did my bit. I did my vote as well.
to say what you thought. And there was an empty box when I saw it, which said AI will. There was a box for improve efficiency or reduce the workforce or all sorts of conclusions. AI will. And one was improve supplier relationships. Completely empty box. And I think next year people will realize that they are ticking that box. I think this has been massively overlooked. And people will realize very quickly that if the number one use case, which it is, of ChatGPT today is counseling and virtual friendships, and it is, it's been several studies that say that that is the most prevalent use case. People are creating relationships with their AI chatbots or agents or whatever. And for good or for ill, it is happening. And we have seen it a lot in Nibble, where people are very charming, very conversational, very rude, but very human. And this is both a risk and an opportunity. But actually, in our area, it's an opportunity to create a relationship with people you don't have time to have a good relationship with. I mean, you know, think of your favorite brand. I don't know, Gymshark or Nike. For the big fans of these brands or Coca-Cola, they do feel like they have a relationship with the brand. Well, how did they do that? Because Coca-Cola, Nike, and Gymshark, they don't know who on earth I am. But you do feel like you have a relationship, and the same tools and opportunities for personalization are available to procurement now. And for me, the easiest comparison is reading a really good book, watching a fantastic film, or playing a brilliant computer game. It's that suspension of disbelief. It's not that you thought any of those things were real, but you enjoyed the moment and you suspended disbelief. And that is what people are starting to do with AI.
Do you think people are more minded to do that in their personal lives than in their business lives?
Interesting. I don't know. I think it's just in human nature. I think it's in human nature. So I think a small supplier talking to a very, very large procurement organization, it's going to be on the human side. There will also be AI to AI, and that will be different. I think the relationships there will be more transactional, more about getting a win-win outcome.
I can't wait to watch that. Actually, I'd love to see that live, to see AI versus AI negotiation.
We think we've seen quite a few AI conversations already talking to Nibble. So, but not enough to change the optimization. Do you sort of mean? Not enough to say, I optimize this way for robots and I optimize this way for humans. But in the end, I think we'll see that.
But just as another point, I mentioned that American CPO previously in that same conversation where I spoke about the psychology. He told me that they'd surveyed their suppliers as to whether they were comfortable with them, you know, basically negotiating extended payment terms with, you know, the AI, and everyone came back saying, look, you know, we're quite happy to do that. It was actually a better experience than doing it with humans. So
we've done similar.
Yeah,
similar. People like it better because it's quick, it's clear, it's less emotionally daunting, right, than negotiating with a person.
Yeah, we touched on trust previously. Is that the biggest barrier to adoption, or are there other sort of mindset issues that I think procurement and maybe even
look, I think it's always systems and systems integrations and technical things that are a huge barrier to adoption. But a barrier to effectiveness is trust. And so one of the things I'm afraid of over the next couple of years is, as the technology will become more adopted and will overcome all of these technological and integration barriers by just being smart APIs and smart integrations, or maybe even agentic. We're starting to talk to some people who are saying, I have an agent already in my organization, in my procurement team, let's say, and that's secure and cyber secure and effective. But I don't mind that agent taking instructions from your agent, which may help the integration, right? Can you imagine that the agent just then takes instructions from my agent? So it never looks like Nibble talking to you. It looks like Walmart's agent or Siemens agent or BASF's agent. So I think that's interesting. So I think we'll overcome the technical challenges. Now, the trust thing, I don't think, again, I don't think people are thinking about enough.
Right.
And I think the problem then will be is everything will work once and it won't work a second time if you haven't used it as a trusted relationship tool. And so one of the things that we talk to our clients about is, yes, fine, we're very happy to improve your payment terms, make a working capital saving or make a cost saving for you, and we want to deliver high ROI. I do not want to sound unambitious on that. I am very ambitious on the financial returns.
Yeah.
But you can't push it too hard. You can't push it beyond what a relationship can take. And it's very short-sighted to do that, right? Like, we want to do the first negotiation for you, but we want to do the next one next year. And we want to negotiate on your behalf every year for the next 10 years. And you know, as an individual, you know, let's say you went for a pay rise tomorrow and you asked, I know you run your own company, so do I, so who would we ask?
I think I deserve it.
But you argue with yourself to give yourself a pay rise, right? And then you argue with yourself to say, well, we can't afford the full 15% that you're asking for, but we can give you 6%. But of course, the context of the pay rise discussion that's going to happen next year is going to be in the context of you asking for 15% and getting 6%. And that's going to give you context to say, well, I was really understanding last year, I'm more ambitious this year, or vice versa, right? And with that in mind, you can create a trusted relationship. But if you push it too far, too fast, you might break things.
Yeah, indeed. And this comes back to your earlier point about the psychology and again, the whole skills thing. So people talk to me about, of course, the skills of procurement. And so, you know, you've got this new generation of important skills which are vital to success in the AI era. But that doesn't mean to say that traditional procurement skills have lost their value. So if you take negotiation, for example, it's still really important to understand the psychology of negotiation of what is a good deal and a bad deal, and to your point, pushing things too far. And that same goes for, say, a pay rise or whether it be a supplier contract. But yeah, the psychology of negotiations is still vital part of being good at it. It's just that you're now using it in a different environment, which I think a lot of people perhaps don't get their head around until they start to engage and try these new tools to do that. So on that, I mean, you know, some of the talk last week at DPW and indeed in the market generally is the whole sort of buy versus build. You've got big organisations now looking to bring in capability around AI, and I'm sure they're looking at what they can build and do themselves. You've written, I think, a few LinkedIn posts about making a strong case against DIY solutions. What's your advice to procurement leaders who are perhaps thinking about trying to do exactly that rather than come out and buy a tool like Nibble or one of your competitors?
It's fast versus slow. I think more than ever, you can build it yourself fast and get instant responses, instant returns. More than ever, you can kind of, I don't know, people talk about vibe coding. I don't think I really know what vibe coding is, but the idea of just knocking something over the line, and that is more available to you now than it ever was. But the longevity of that tool will be limited, partly because we see this all the time, but the LLMs update and then the tool doesn't work as well.
Yeah.
And so you want someone who really cares about that tool to be consistently updating it. And secondly, it won't scale. And it won't fit into your full process and your full workflow, and it won't understand all of your data. The places where I see a scale effect already happening is places where, let's say, the organization has done a global agreement with Microsoft.
Right.
Everything's on Microsoft. So people can come in the morning and say, am I still on track to meet my KPIs for this month? And it's read your emails, and it's read your calendar, and it's read your documentation on your shared drive. You know, it's read your KPIs in your appraisal. And that's not so much the LLM as the information that's just available to it. And I think what we're not seeing so much yet is that effect happening in workflows and processes internally, because I think people are still just making sure, and this is what I understand, you know, orchestration is going to help with, and so on and so forth. But I think tying it all together takes a little bit of time. but then the impact will be exponential. So I think we will see huge capabilities being bought in, and I think we'll continue to feel like we're being hyped a little bit, but I think in 5 years' time, it'll be unrecognizable.
So what criteria should a procurement leader be thinking about when designing whether to partner with a particular AI vendor, do you think? What are the right things that they need to focus on?
I think they need to fit into your broader tech stack. They need to have all the integrations into your major pieces of tech, your orchestration layer or your SAP or whatever you're using. I think even if you don't use them to begin with, that needs to be where you go. We work really hard to deliver a non-integration POC because we find that just happens quicker.
Right.
But there's not much point doing that if you don't have a plan to integrate. So I think for me, it's about building that roadmap. It's like, here's the quick proof. But if we meet this milestone, we all know what our ambition is for the next milestone and the next milestone and the next milestone. And I think if you take in specialists, and we are fundamentally a specialist, you need to be minded to use it in several different places. Even if the first POC is, let's say, tail spend or commodity pricing or RFPs, then you need to say, well, if that works, I want it here and I want it here and I want it here. And then you can work deeply with a partner who can help you modify and bespoke the integration to suit your needs. People talk a lot about standardization of platforms and tech stacks. And I'm newer to procurement than you are, Andrew, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. But everything I've heard says that people have very different processes and very different expectations. And what I find almost confusing is if you took a situation a bit like, let's say, MRO, maintenance renewals, if you operate something where you're building exquisitely delicate pieces of machinery, let's say you're Philips and you're building medical equipment that has to be extremely accurate, an MRI scan or something like that, your maintenance contracts are strategic for you, because if the production process isn't maintained beautifully, that absolutely precision engineering is not going to work. But if you are an office-based operation, your maintenance contracts are not strategic, right? And so then suddenly the need to manage those in a completely different way, even though they're the same thing and you've got an MRO category manager, it's completely different level of strategic importance, and therefore your tech stack and your processes and the way you approach it and the skills that you want your people to have are totally different. So things have the same name, but they don't work the same. And I think that's, for me, as a sort of relatively new mover in procurement, that's a big learning.
I've heard lots of different perspectives on that over the years, Rosie, and I think I would best summarise it as follows. Everyone thinks their procurement department is unique and different. And you talk to software salespeople in particular, and they'll say, yeah, they all think that. In some ways, they're all very, very similar, but then they've all got their own unique bits. And so the strategic element of it, for example, is a classic example of that. So yes, there are certainly some commonalities across many, many procurement departments, but there's things that make them unique. And this is why there's so many vendors out there. Some suit others better than than competitors, and it's a sort of fascinating landscape to observe. But yeah, there's a bit of both in there. Really, some similarities and some unique traits. But I mean, you mentioned the skills there. We talked there about the thought process for procurement is about buy versus build. And of course, last week we were in a room full of procurement practitioners who, in many cases, were there for education to learn about what's possible. But for people who weren't able to make events like DPW or the other big procurement events, what should CPOs be doing now to prepare for this reality? Is it about skills? Is it about mindset? Is it about education? What are the key things that they should be focusing on?
I think skills is, talking to some of my friends in the space, skills is still a big challenge. I spoke to one CPO who said, look, let's say we wanted to take on a piece of innovative technology like Nibble. I have a team of 40 people, and there are only 2 people that could manage that process for me, because it's experimental, because it starts small, because it needs to scale, because it's a different way of doing things. And 2 people in my 40 are excited about that, and 38 people in my 40 are just really good at business as usual, right? And And I think that is a huge challenge, and a lot of it's confidence, right? Like those people who like business as usual, many of them maybe wish they were doing more in the AI space, but they're not sure how to go, how to start.
Yeah, indeed. And I think education, knowledge, and which in itself creates the confidence is a vital factor. But I mean, that example there, I think is, really one thing that a lot of procurement teams have got in common.
Yeah.
Got a small nucleus of people who are excited and want to push on, and a lot of others who are quite scared of the change and are comfortable with what they're doing already. And that's one of the reasons why we've created the new business agentic procurement, because we think there's some really important things that can be done to address that. But I mean, I would just encourage people to experiment. I mean, we talk a lot about insight procurement, and it's the thing that gets mentioned in almost every presentation, at every event, and I go to most of them. But it's never been more important and more of a gift.
Yeah, try it yourself, because if you had a bad experience using ChatGPT, you're instructed on how to ask a good question next time somebody tells you it can do everything perfectly, right? Like, I mean, it's simple stuff like that. It's your own personal enthusiasms and skepticisms that give you the confidence to ask the next question.
Yeah, I went back into GPT and looked in the settings at my very first prompt, which was why use a specialist recruiter. And when I read the output at the time, I remember being blown away, thinking, wow, that's amazing. That's exactly what I think, but put in a much better way than I could ever articulate. I look at the prompts that I write now, for example, and the outputs that I get and the challenges that I give and the way I approach it. And it's like, personally, I'm very pleased with the journey I've been on.
But when I was at uni, actually, surfing the internet was quite new. That dates me exactly, doesn't it? Right? But it was just when Ask Jeeves was going out of fashion and Yahoo was coming in, right? And Google was quite newfangled. But I remember sitting down and learning how to Google something and how to find something. It's just the same, isn't it? It's just you've got to learn, right?
Yeah, well, my daughter's just got a first from Newcastle, and she's made very good use of AI tools in agreement with her tutors, with her father's guidance, I would add. But if you talk about, what you do when you were at university, in my day at university, we used to phone up on our landline and say, hey, what time we're meeting in the pub. So I'm really showing my age there. That will.
But it changed fast, right? Changed fast.
Not.
I think I had a boyfriend who had a mobile phone, but the rest of us didn't have mobiles. I can't think how we organised things. I really don't.
I had a mobile phone in my first job in recruitment. I didn't have many people to call on it, but I did have a mobile phone in my first job in recruitment in the mid-90s. So there we go. Right. Before we go back to all the technology of the past, Rosie, that's been really insightful. Thank you so much. So if people want to learn more about what Nibble are doing, the way your tools are creating really great outcomes for your customers, how can they contact you?
Look, I'm prolific on LinkedIn. So Rosie Bailey Nibble on LinkedIn will find you. I also post a weekly newsletter, which I try really hard not to make a product pitch and try to make it useful. Do follow that. Do tell me. I write all of them, right? I do have some, ChatGPT sometimes helps me, but I do write them. Yes. So if you've got any feedback on that, that would be great too.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Everyone, thank you for watching. I hope you found that insightful. Please do reach out to Rosie for more information, or if you want to talk about the skills, landscape, of course, or hiring, of course. I'd love to hear from you myself. Of course, you can get me on LinkedIn. I'm on there probably just about as much as Rosie, actually. Okay, thanks everyone. Appreciate your time. And thank you again, Rosie.